There we go. Yeah, if everyone would like to put themselves on mute now, then we can hear clearly to Debbie, and I'll do that myself. So Debbie, we met many years ago. We were both part of the KIN network, and I'm continually impressed with how much energy and enthusiasm she has for all her projects. And she's a very wise lady. So I'm very grateful that she spent some time to share her current experience with us all today. So thank you, Debbie, and over to you.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, Nancy. It's lovely to be here, and really nice just to recognise quite a few of the names there. A lot of those people that I've known for really quite a long time now, including yourself, Nancy. So it's just lovely to be here. Thank you very much for the intro. So as Nancy says, all very informal really. So do, whilst I think we are muted, or you guys are muted, I'm not. Do feel free to pop any questions into the chat. I'd be very happy to pick them up when I get a chance. And in the meantime, I'm just going to share a little bit of my experience of a particular project that I'm working on at the moment. It's a work in progress, which is an important point to stress here. So this is something which is at a point in time, but will continue to change. And part of my reason for sharing this with you today is because I'm really keen to get your feedback on what we're doing. We're all experts together. We're all people that have got lots of experience. So, you know, I'd love to tap into some of that experience from around the table, the proverbial table today, really just to get your views on things and any input that you can give me on where I am. So anyway, that's kind of the background. I'll go into detail, but what I'm going to do, she says, trying to make sure this works. Let's just make sure I've got the controls back. There we go. That should do it. Is really just to take you through the experience. I think we've probably covered these things here. So in terms of things like do use the chat. We've got lots of people around the world here. I think people have been sharing where they are in the world, which is really nice to see. So do continue to do that, and then I will press on. Here we go with the next slide. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit of a story about Debbie Lawley, that's me, and how come I ever ended up in this world of kind of knowledge management and knowledge sharing, collaboration. How did that ever happen? I think it's interesting when we all do reflect on our careers as to how we got into this world, because there's never a single journey for people, and certainly it's not been a straightforward journey. I never actually looked up and decided one day that this is where I wanted to be, but I have to say I've no regrets whatsoever about being in this space, because I think it's an incredibly exciting area to work in, and even more exciting than ever really in the current situation we find ourselves in. So where did it start for me? And I'll kind of explain why it's important to just tell a bit of the story in a minute. I am actually a technologist in my background. So I've always worked one way or another in IT, and that was really my kind of foundation career, if you like. And I gradually got lots more experience. I took on more responsibility. And that included joining a wonderful company called Hutchison Microtel, that actually then renamed itself just after I joined to this bizarre company called Orange, which was, I thought for a minute there I'd made a drastic mistake, but then worked out that I actually made a wonderful move by joining such an innovative and exciting organization. And it was really a marvelous time in a career to be working with a startup like Orange, that then went through such an amazing growth at that time. It was really the startup of the 1990s, very exciting time to be there. My responsibility was really into the IT services. So I had a lot of responsibility, lots of people working for me. I think Erica, is on the line today, will remember those days very well, because she's also an ex-Orangeite, and she'll remember me and my job in that time. And so much of the problems that we had were issues around what I came to understand in due course of time about knowledge management and knowledge sharing and collaboration. So we did have a tendency in those heady days of growth and excitement to reward behaviours which were what I'd call hero behaviours. So people rushing in to save the day. And so we didn't want to lose them. So therefore we tended to praise them and to reward them. And that meant that we had more heroes. But what that meant was we kept on having issues, which you can sort of see in that slide there, where people kind of sat around thinking, things keep breaking, we're not moving forward, we're still having the same sorts of issues. And that kept on being a problem. It did feel a bit kind of like a repeated cycle that I was on, like some kind of massive hamster wheel of time, which was, not the best place to be. So in trying to sort it out, I did kind of get to understand that this was something to do with the way in which we treated our knowledge. And in that kind of an organization, we moved very fast. It was a very, very fast moving time, that the speed of change was phenomenal. Too fast to really lay down any hard and fast processes or to really document things very progressively. Couldn't be done. So we had to do different ways of working, really. And at that time, I kind of tried to explore places where I could find other people with similar sorts of problems, where I could try and understand what was behind this sort of issue that I was facing. And as a consequence, I joined the Henley Forum in Knowledge Management, and I also joined, being a greedy sort of person, the Knowledge Innovation Network, which was set up by Warwick Business School. And by joining those organisations, and with Kin in particular, founder member, it was a great time to work very progressively in this area of collaboration, knowledge management, knowledge sharing, growth of communities. And being able to do that was phenomenal. It was a real eye-opener for me, and I was able to bring a lot of that shared understanding and that emerging capability back to Orange at that time, and that was great. It was such a progressive role to have, and such an exciting thing to do. And in fact, I moved then from a technology role into looking at organisational learning across the Orange Group, which was a brilliant move and a very enjoyable role. Increasingly, I was ending up working as in a kind of consultancy role, really, with other outside organisations working around the table to fix bigger problems. And that was an incredibly exciting thing to do. And as a consequence of that, I decided to eventually jump ship and became a consultant in my own right, working and set up a business called Willow DNA, which was all focused on learning and knowledge and really looking at fast moving organizations and how that worked. So that's kind of a background, if you like, in terms of the kind of person that I am and where I've come from. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about where I am today and the project, therefore, that I'm kind of working on at the moment. Do pop anything in the chat. I'm not keeping an eye on it myself, but I know that Nancy and Michael will be doing that for me. So over time, then in Willow DNA, I got increasingly into especially the online learning space and how that works with communities. How online learning works best if community has a sense of ownership of that, because then in that way you get that kind of shared experience of working together and learning together, but then distilling that knowledge and actually making it accessible for people, both in terms of explicit content, but also in terms of who to contact, who to talk to, and how to evolve knowledge and understanding together. And then over the years, I even create my own platform. So, well, with my colleagues, I have to say, well, not me personally, but with my colleagues. So we've got made our own kind of pathway LMS, which was very much focused on knowledge management principles and actually distilling different types of knowledge in kind of a pathway of learning and interact that with social learning as well. So that was great fun. And over the years, worked with lots of really, really exciting companies and lots of different arenas, which has been, everyone is always a learning experience. So for myself, in terms of feeling like, you personally grow, it's not just a question of what you bring personally to a project, it's also what you get from it as well as an individual. And I'm sure a lot of people will recognize that as a feature of working in the field that we do work in. So there's been a great time, and met lots of really lovely people over the years. One of whom is this guy on the left here, Anderson Hurst. Anderson is a lovely guy. Funny enough, not too different a journey in some ways, but Anderson's experience has always been about the art and science of selling and business growth. That's kind of where he's always been, and I've known Anderson for a long time, and he is he's just such a bright guy, such an approachable chap, and such a nice person to work with. That's always a bit of a gold standard, isn't it? It's always great to have lovely people to work with. And over time, we kind of evolved this concept, if you like, that what we'd really like to do is to help people to understand how to construct a good sales organization. What does sales leadership need to look like? How can you evolve good sales leadership? I have to say, in my business experience, I think it's one of the areas I've always found very difficult, actually, is understanding how to do that well. I think it is a real challenge. And we decided that what we'd try to do is actually do a project together where we actually try and bring the best of both of our worlds, if you like. So pull together my background really about online learning, about how that works, about the KM side, with Anderson's knowledge about sales leadership, all his experience working with multiple different organizations, but also a very strong evidence-based approach to sales leadership. And you know, he's very tapped into the academic side as well as the experiential side. And we decided to try and create a project to try to make that accessible to sales leaders, whether they are big business or whether they are, you know, a lot of folks doing startups where they really know their product but don't necessarily know really how to inject business growth into that through good selling practice. So we thought, let's try and see if we can make this work. And so we decided to create Kojo. Kojopro is the product that we have created as a consequence. And if I can just get my mouse working again, there we go. What we decided to do was to actually distill that knowledge and create a platform as a consequence. Now, what I'm going to do now is ask a few questions of yourself, but I'm going to use some didgery-pokery from Nancy, who I think is going to kick a poll off at this point. So that we can get a little bit of input from yourselves here. So Nancy, do you want to?
Yes, thanks Debbie. That was a great introduction to your experience. Thank you for sharing that with us. We now would like to know a bit about the people on the call today. So many of us might have had experience using online spaces for skills development, maybe e-learning at your organisations and things like that. But have you had any experience developing those? Perhaps you're in a project at the moment. We'd love to get a feel for what experience you've had, either using it before or developing it. And then we can see what the experience, the collective experience of the group today. Perhaps your experience is good, bad, ugly. Maybe you want to share a bit more on the channel, on the chat channel afterwards. Give you a last few seconds to experience the poll, and then we'll share the results with you. We do polls fairly regularly in the KCN because we found both for the speakers and the audience, it's helped them understand who else is on the call and what sort of experience they have in the group. So thank you for participating in that. I'm going to stop the poll now and I'm going to share the results. Can you all see that? So we've got 93% have had experience using them. So that's very common. But developing it, oh yeah, just 50% of, so great audience for you, Debbie, this afternoon that have had experience developing them. And so tell me more in the chat and we'll come back in a second. What is it, was it great? Was it amazing? Was it awful? What was your experience? If you could share that in the chat, Debbie, I'll interrupt you a little bit further on and confirm what results we had.
Okay, lovely, thank you for that. No, very, very interesting. And you know, I'm not surprised that so many people had experience, certainly in using online spaces for skills development. I think you know, it's quite common these days. Having to develop it is a different task, and I think the experience of that is likely to be very mixed in terms of how effective that's been. And I'm sure you know, we all in our past have had bad experiences as well as good ones. So it'd be very interesting just to see what people share in the group chat there. And I suspect, as I said, that it's probably quite mixed. Anyway, that was our goal in terms of actually understanding how to distill knowledge and make that accessible for this very tricky subject of sales leadership was something that we were keen to do. And just pulling from my immediate background, then what I was keen to avoid was the typical problems you get with content catalogues. I'm sure we've all had a bit of experience with those. And the typical problems tend to be this lack of context relevance. So it's so general that actually it just becomes lacking in meaning. And if you then apply that to the particular learner, then you have to hunt through so much stuff before you find anything that's relevant to you as an individual. It makes it very tricky. Quite often, then also in addition to that, these catalogues get loaded into an organization, but there's no connection really with your manager who's got any responsibility for your development. And quite often there's a lot of what I call shiny stuff around. In other words, there's some quite tricky or interesting technical features, but are they useful or not? That can be quite a challenge. So the result of that is that it's often not credible, it's hard to digest, and the technology can be quite inaccessible. So those were the typical pitfalls that we were seeking to avoid when we were looking at Kojo. And in particular, when we're thinking about this particular group of learners, then it was really relevant to focus in on a few particular points. For sales leaders, they're not, they tend to be very target driven. They're very, very focused on business growth. They're very, very keen indeed to make sure that they spend their time well. So it's really important that when we did do Kojo, that we really took great care over how the content was actually distilled and curated. We were worried that the learner centricity side of it, that you know, you can design something, but the learners will always find their way around this. So actually understanding this particular group of learners, where again, sales leaders, then they're not going to be very tolerant of anything, but they've got to really work their way around. They're very targeted, very time pressured. Quite often had bad experiences with online learning in the past, and that was the last thing that we wanted to do when we put this together. And another point here is not to divorce it from the support of the manager with their team. One of the differences you get when you have managers properly involved in supporting their teams is the difference in the outcome. And if you just look at this little graph here, the one thing I'd pick out in particular is the difference on that bottom one there, the realization of the objectives being coached. With a coach, in other words, especially with your manager as a coach, then the likelihood of actually achieving the objective is much, much higher if the manager is engaged with the objective rather than disengaged. So I think that's a lesson for all of us. I'm sure we've all been impacted one way or another, either positively or negatively, by that. And the other thing I wanted to avoid, although this hairstyle looks quite relevant for quite a lot of people that are around at the moment, although I think it's getting rectified, we wanted to avoid the theme of the day, the kind of the gamification, the mobile learning, all those kind of buzzy buzzwords, but really just to sort of make the technology something that works for people and not just a kind of a trend thing. Now, where this gets closer to the actual learning side, this is quite a complicated slide really, and I know that the guys will share this afterwards, so if you find it useful, then you know you can have this afterwards to focus on. But there's a difference between where your organization is on this journey between efficiency and effectiveness. And when it comes to learning, especially learning online, but learning in any context really, then you have the kind of formal ad hoc training which is pushed by the organization, and they're really about trying to deliver it efficiently. It's very tactical. When you're trying to actually go for business growth, and this is really key, especially when you're looking at something like sales leadership, then really tying that into knowledge flow, learning and innovation is key. And in the context of sales leadership, then things like product knowledge and customer knowledge are the key areas really to focus in here. And actually pulling that together with how teams are performing in the field should be very much improvement based, but it's very, very kind of timely and something which is very responsive to changing times. And we're keen to really tap into that when we're looking at sales leadership. But I think that as a feature applies in many different contexts. So that's something that we were very, very keen to ensure that we were playing our part with. Ooh, 1 minute, just one here. So beg your pardon just for a moment. Oh, it's come back again. That's good. Right. So the learning design that we were applying, we wanted to be thoughtful about it. We wanted to have formal support, but link that with social. We wanted to have it accessible. We wanted to encourage leadership dialogue and so on. So we wanted to make it easy for the learners, especially this group of learners, which were likely to be really quite intolerant. And therefore, we wanted to move away from, you've got the concept of the one-day classroom event, or you get e-learning where you do module 1, module 2, and then you do a test and it's meant to be done. But we really wanted to make it much more e-learning too, which is much more focused on just consuming the right kind of content at the right time for you, so that whole time to mastery thing makes sense for you in the context that you're actually learning in. And that was a key thing for us. And therefore, that's what we've tried to integrate with Kojopro. So what I'm going to do now, just check time here, so I think we're pretty much on time, is to flick over now. Actually, I'm going to take you live into the platform. Always a dodgy time, this one. So I'm going to just make sure that this is going to work for me. So bear with me whilst I just move from being in the slideshow to coming over to Kojopro. Now, my question is, can you still see my screen? So Nancy, can you very kindly just come online and let me know that it's working okay? And
yeah, no, we can see it fine, thank you.
Lovely.
Do ask any questions on the platform while she goes through this demo. I think that will help us. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, Nancy. So one of the key things we wanted to make sure is that we although, you know, Lord above, I've developed my own LMS with my team, and so I can absolutely see where a well-curated LMS with good integration of structure and social is brilliant. But that's not what we wanted here. We really wanted to focus on the skills side of it and make that the key element of it. So we changed the format completely. And I'm actually logged in at the moment, so I'm going to just kind of take you through a few things. So we can search the catalogue. There's a whole load of material behind this, many, many assets behind it. So if you wanted to look up a word like account management, then you can do it, and you can pick up multiple assets that you can pick from, and then go into and consume accordingly. But what we wanted to start off with was more about getting the context right. So we provide a diagnostic, which means that people can start looking or getting a feel for where looking at the content would probably make a bigger difference to them. So it could be, and we've created this, it's really a distillation of quite a big complex diagnostic that we do, but this is kind of a distillation of it. And what we do is, by asking people just to go through this, it enables them to actually prioritize their learning more effectively. By going through it, they can actually start to see really where it would be good to spend more of their time, if you like. So you'll begin to see the breakdown of the results, doing the kind of traffic light build on the right there as we go through it. So some things, you know, I'm quite good at, but other things then, you know, not so good at or could do with improvement. And some things are a real challenge for us. So it helps the learner, the sales leader, the person responsible for sales growth, to actually really think about where they could prioritize their time. And by doing that, it's an easy guide for them to start really focusing on creating an experience. And what they can do now is, if they go on to any one of these elements here, they can start to build up. I just finished this. So complete the diagnostic, the results displayed, and obviously it read where they ought to focus their attention really. And they can go into any of these aspects here and browse the catalogue now for that particular aspect. So now I've gone into competition and I can say, well, you know, I could really do with a video on this, because I'd like to get the broad explanation of how I should look at competition. Is it something I should spend time on? Is it something which, how do I simply handle this or look at this? But then we also provide things like application guides so that people can really create their own strategy for these things and really think about how to properly address these things. And if they go into any of these things, then they can actually start to build this up. And they can, here, if you look at it, add to a playlist. I'll come back to that in a minute. But it also produces things like interactive templates, so they can very quickly create their own working guide, if you like, to be able to go through these things. And that's kind of the way that the diagnostic works. And if I go into any of the others, like negotiating, defending margin, then again, I can start picking out the things which I want to spend time on and add those things to my playlist. So gradually, bit by bit, I'm building something up. But equally, I can go through to the catalogue. So if there's something I want to focus on, then I can have a look at these three areas here, whether it's strategy, processes, or people. If I click on people, then I can see that that was the area that came up in the diagnostic, but I can equally well have a look at some of those other things there. And what it all does over time is I start to create my own playlist. So there's no way that a sales leader is really going to want to labour themselves through courses. This is not going to happen for those kind of guys. And when I say guys, I mean that in the broader sense of the word. But by creating a playlist, it means you're in control of your own learning. And it means that it can be very practical. So you can have the background, it can be practical, and you can build and actually create your own approach to your own performance improvement over time. I should also say here that we also include a thing called a team playlist. So if you're part of a team, now I'm part of somebody else's team in this case, but I haven't been added to a playlist for the team, then you can have not just individual playlists, but you can have one for the team as a whole, and individuals can have team playlists. So we wanted to make it quite cohesive. So going back to that point about managers, being a coaching manager enables that to happen in a very, very interactive way. But really, overall, what it means is that people are properly in control of the content. And I could go into more detail here. Obviously, I could go into any of these things in more detail. So in terms of things like the video, for example, then we've got this. Let's just check with it, please, man. So yeah, just nicely done so that it's right and it's appropriate, but they're not too long. So it gives a sense of easily digestible, chunked up content, which you can build over time. And I think in many ways that's the kind of the key elements of it. And I could go into more detail, but I'm not here really to try to sell the concept there, but really just to share how we've taken good KM content and approaches and principles, and we have been keen to make sure that we're applying them in a very practical way to the way in which we're dealing with this particular subject. So we've done quite a lot of things differently here. Just going into bringing this up, and some of the things that I wanted to share with you about how we've approached it differently and what we've done is that acceptance that sales leaders don't want courses, they want help. So that was always key for us, really, in terms of what the way we wanted to approach. And hopefully you've seen that there, that it's not courses as such, they are in charge of it. But because of that, an LMS wasn't going to cut the mustard. So we didn't even, although we looked at our own LMS, we looked at others, we considered changing them, we didn't feel it was particularly relevant. We wanted to put sales leaders in control themselves. So the concept of the playlist seemed to be something which was really useful as a kind of a concept, really, that could help them feel that they were in charge of their destiny. The tricky bit is that sales leaders often want answers to questions, but they don't know what those questions really are. In other words, people come to sales leadership without really understanding what a good structure would look like. And so actually providing some guidance and structure is really, really helpful. So it's that balancing off of, well, sales leaders knowing they need help in a particular area, but also giving that balance with guidance and structure, which they might not otherwise have. And they really wanted it to be practical and not kind of just theory, but a bit of theory does help. I should add here as well that we did go through a whole process of interviewing different sales leaders to try to really get a feel for what they thought was important. So this wasn't stuff that we kind of made up. We did interview them and we did talk to them about this. But the one thing I would add here is, of course, we came to launch this, at least at this stage, which is we're kind of in the prototype stage, really, right when a pandemic hits. So in terms of it being a good time to launch, well, probably not really, not the best time to launch. But nonetheless, an interesting time for us all. We're all struggling one way or another, aren't we? And so that's our poor timing there, really. But who was to guess that one? So there we go. I wanted to share that with you. I don't know whether we've got any questions at this point. Nancy, did you want to?
Yes, no, lots. And actually there was some, just for your knowledge, Debbie, there's some people that have had some experience, like Simon's gave an example from Barclays that he set up, and we can look at that link afterwards. Maria's has experience building a skills matrix product to assess consultant skills. It was cool because it had a heat matrix and could search on skills. They then went on to say a bit about the bad experiences that they had, and that there was a big acknowledgement that if the managers aren't on board, there's no support there, and it becomes a bit of a tick box exercise rather than having that desired impact of mastery that you confirmed. I think for me, I have never seen a project brief on online learning that says to bring the managers on board, and I mean it's just never in scope from my experience. So I think the group sort of confirmed that as well. And then there was some other, and then there's some questions at the end that I'll come to. So then they were sort of saying the successful of these online learning is the attitudes of the managers, and to really deliver that sort of real learning. And they've been talking about higher education, Judy and Michael, and things like that. Now, when you went into the platform, these are the comments that people have made. Simon found the live updating of the breakdown a little bit scary, and I asked him why, and he felt that people might not paint the true picture. They might over-egg where they are because the true, I can't say it, what is really true about themselves, they wouldn't be comfortable sharing. So there was a sort of comment on that. Erica really liked the RAG reporting, felt it was really easy to follow and focus, and Maria liked the diagnostic aspect directly to the learning pathway. I'm just thinking now, looking at the question. So they like the interactive template. So Erica had a question: is the app accessible from mobile phones, and can people follow the modules as they move and have free time?
Yeah, definitely. So it's mobile friendly. We haven't done a mobile app, so you do have to be on the internet, but you can absolutely use it on mobile, and it's fully responsive. So whether you're on tablet, mobile, or whatever, then it's fully responsive, and a lot of the content is downloadable as well. So if you want to, say, create some of those templates, you can literally download them and work on them. where you are. You don't have to try and do that on your mobile or anything or whatever, but that's then for people to work on. So what was the other one that says?
And then Maria asked, is there a review to check the understanding at the end of the module? So how do you know this process is having the desired impact that we want?
Really good question. At the end of the day, obviously this is in their hands, so it's and that kind of goes back to the previous question, really. Would they be honest? If they're being dishonest or not, dishonest might be too strong a word. If they're not being clear and frank about their own performance, then they're only going to damage themselves, because this is theirs. This isn't being monitored by somebody else. This is their learning. So it really is in their hands to control this. In terms of the impact at the end, again, really up to them. The sales leaders are probably the most directly targeted department of any organization, because it's bleeding obvious. If they don't perform, then it's such a big impact in terms of sales and the business itself. It's the area of on the sharpest edge, if you like, of performance. So the results of the outcome is very clear. What I would say is that of the response we've had so far, then at least half of people interacting with us actually want us to combine this with their own assigned coach. So although they love the fact they've got this ability to shape their learning path with their playlist, what they really want alongside it is somebody who's actually going to take notice of what they're doing. Quite often sales leaders are kind of pretty isolated people. So actually having somebody, and in these COVID times, of course, it's always at the end of a Zoom call or something, but actually having somebody to go through and just say check in with them on a regular basis, and therefore monitor performance and see how that is changing over time, is something that is really valued. So I think that's a really, really good point that Marie raises there.
Great. I think we're back on your slide, on your presentation view, but that doesn't matter. There's lots of words of support. Michael said that he liked how you can go back and replay specific sections rather than having to go through it again. And I think I echoed that you can filter what's most pressing. We're always tied with what do I need to do today? And I quite like that the platform helps me do that. We also asked, is there an aspect that you could incorporate one-to-one mentoring into something like this? Or is there some sort of prompt that could meet that manager connection? Have you thought about that, or are you working on anything like that?
Well, yeah, definitely. And the thing I didn't really show you very much of is that the team playlist side of it. So it can act as a kind of a what's the word for it? It's like a point of dialogue, really. So by actually having the team version, then you can have that development conversation with your team. And in terms of, say, some of the aspirant people or people that have just coming on as newbies, it just gives that chance to create collectively, as a proper coaching collaborative, the relevant types of playlists together that are going to be relevant for that person at that point in time, or for the whole team. So if you want a whole team experience, then you can do it, and you can map that up as part of the team dialogue over time. So as a kind of a point of dialogue. I can't think of a better way of saying that, really, but it enables people to have that dialogue around the content, but to shape the content according to the need of that team at that time. And they can do that with them between themselves, or like we have with one of our customers at the moment. Then we're doing it with we're providing that external input, external coaching with them over time, so that it becomes something which that time to mastery is an opportunity for time to mastery over a period which they can define, which is neat, and we're enjoying that very much. It's just such fun to work with those kind of guys in that sort of situation. It's quite a privilege, really.
Yeah, I like that. That you, I mean, you could almost use it as a recruitment tool to sort of see which areas of mastery you're lacking within your team,
Oh,
if you need to, and you're
yeah,
building that.
yeah.
It's, that would be interesting. I think building on what Simon said, you know, there's sales people traditionally are very competitive, and obviously when it's transparent and there's just in the colouring that there's weaknesses, I would love to see how, using knowledge and collaborative techniques, how they grow that mastery together in an open, transparent way, because I know from the sales teams I've worked with, that's and sales techniques aren't even shared because they want to win the quarter or whatever the target. So it's an interesting channel to, you know, an interesting sector to, or group to focus on.
Yeah, well, that links really quite strongly, doesn't it, with the whole kind of collaborative knowledge management side, because actually, in my experience, there's two groups of people, and I'm going to be cringing here in a minute because I'm not quite sure exactly which areas everybody works in online here. So I've got to be careful what I say, haven't I? But there are two groups of people where the competitive spirit is very strong, and it can actually cause problems when you're trying to create collaboration. And that one of them is sales. I mean, there's no two ways about it. That is, sales is one of them. But the other one, she says, sitting tight and holding tight, is lawyers.
Yeah, there is a couple of legal colleagues here.
Traditionally, that's been an issue. I think there's been a lot of moves in more recent years to overcome that. Actually,
yeah, you can share techniques in 6-minute intervals.
Yeah. Oh,
you can knowledge share. I'm sure the colleagues from the legal sector will confirm that. Another question: how did you identify what elements of the training? How did you do that? You wanted to hear a bit more about the journey, getting to that diagnostic stage. How did you get there?
Well, in terms of what's in the diagnostic, or in terms of what the content is overall?
The content overall, I think. I added in the diagnostic bit.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, no problem. Well, that really does come from Anderson. As I said, Anderson has been immersed in and loves this whole sales leadership, and most of his career has been spent in that place. He does a lot of the lecturing actually for Warwick Business School in their MBA. When it comes to sales leadership, so he's just so knowledgeable, and he's worked with so many different organizations. So in terms of that kind of that mixture of, he knows what the research, he understands the science, but he also kind of knows the art, if that makes sense. And he's great, which is why I've always wanted to work with him on this. It's kind of a really nice, fulfilling project to actually be getting my teeth into with him, because he's, as I say, such a great guy for that. So in terms of actually understanding which areas and which kind of content to put in there, you're right, it could have been vast. But in practice, having worked with many, many different organizations, we know which areas are the hot buttons, if you like. And they come up time and time again. And if you don't get these areas right, there'll be fundamental issues. The bit that we can't do in this, of course, is touch on product knowledge, because product is always completely peculiar to context. But what you can do is talk about how you work with the product specialist, how you work from a sales enablement point of view, to be able to make sure that you've got the right kind of processes that support that working well. And I'm sure that I know Erica's on the line. You'll remember that when you working in, say, telecommunications, you get new products coming through very, very rapidly. Well, unless that product is explained in the right sort of way at the right time to the people that got to sell it, you end up with big problems. So actually getting that process right is really key.
Yeah, so how much time, that makes me think, how much time does it take from, you've got this subject matter expert, you've got the platform, how do you curate that content and have it available for its audience? Is there a desired timeline?
Well, there's a desired timeline. In other words, that you've actually got the right material and the right knowledge to be able to. Yeah. It's not just about selling it. It's actually about pleasing and delighting your customers, isn't it? Because it's of no relevance if you sell something which is completely inappropriate for your customer. You've not sold anything at all. You've just sold a bad reputation. So there's something there about actually being helpful to your customer and being a good educator is not quite the right word, but you know, sometimes customers might not necessarily know, especially if you're dealing with B2B customers, it's quite a complex product. You're actually needing to convey, actually being able to get that right, and being able to perhaps even challenge some customer preconceptions is really important. So, you know, sometimes it's about not selling something as much as it's about selling something, and actually getting that right is key. And that's all part of the whole sales enablement piece, really. Which, funnily enough, they are more probably advanced in the States, dare I say it, than we are necessarily in the UK. But I think we'll see the phrase sales enablement more and more as time goes on.
Sales enablement. I think I could do with some of that. And I echo, just by having a look at what you're available for free, it highlighted things that I hadn't thought about before. So everyone on the line, do make use of what's available for free and have a play. We're all in, although we're not tasked with a sales role, by building KM and communities, we're building buy-in and support and influencing people. So there's definitely crossover and relevance for all of us in here, and that's why I wanted to bring it to you, because I think we're not always very good at it. And we could all be stronger in this area, so our programs can be stronger. Simon's asked, what opportunity is there for customer organization to curate what their employees see? So what could they do in that?
No, that's a really good question, Simon. Thank you for raising that. Yes, when we definitely have got some getting some interest. As I say, it's early days yet, but from some corporates who actually love it, but they really want to be able to make it their branding. Branding matters, let's face it. So they want it not to be Kojopro branding, they want it to be their branding, but they also want to be able to insert some of their own content, some onboarding content, and so on and so forth. So absolutely, that we can absolutely do that. We're in conversation with a couple at the moment. We haven't actually had to do it yet, but that's because it's so, you know, it is early days for us. We really are just launching. So, but that is definitely something which is completely relevant and completely good question to ask, Simon. And I'm looking forward to the day when we actually deliver on that one, because I think that'd be exciting. And also what we'd like to do as well, and we've already done the feasibility for this, is to add in discussion groups on it, so that when you've got especially a dispersed team across a big organization, it gives people a chance not just to actually have their content loaded up, but also to be able to have conversations and potentially ask questions or ask for support across that kind of organization in conjunction with the materials that are available to them.
Great. Is there any other questions from anybody? I'm going to put up a closing poll to get your feedback on how you found today's webinar. But if you've got any burning questions for Debbie, I've put in the chat to, if you try the system, if you try the platform, do let her know what you found useful, what you might improve. We're all learning together. This is what we said at the very beginning. This isn't a sales opportunity or anything like that, but hopefully you can see from experiencing Debbie's journey that there's things, and we just know from working collaboratively we can be stronger together. So I invite all of you, if you're working on anything and you want feedback from your peers, then we've got this channel to have that. Yeah,
and if I can just add my thanks to people here, because as we've been going through this, I've been taking notes. So I've been writing down some of the very, very good points that have been raised, and I found that it's really, really good just to get your input. As I say, there's so many experienced people around the table here today that I really do value that. And if you've got any more thoughts you want to share with me over time, then contact details are there. I think you can see them. I'm not sure, but obviously Nancy would be able to share them anyway. So do reach out if you've got any other points you'd like to share. I'd appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So just to confirm, sounds like, you know, everyone that's completed the poll, and I know that's a bit, you know, if you don't fill in the poll, maybe you didn't enjoy it, but we can see there's some strong support for your session this afternoon, Debbie. 71% extremely helpful and 30% helpful. So thank you very much for confirming that. It's great. I mean, Debbie, it's all volunteer. She's prepared this session directly for us. You know, so it's always nice to know that it's been helpful. I think when she reads back through the chat and your comments, I've tried to do them as best I can. I know it's not the same as having a collected conversation, but hopefully I've raised all your key points. There's lots of thanks now on there. I think Simon's even going to quote you, sales leaders do not want courses, they want help. And Anker said, indeed, very informative, gave me a different perspective on learning. I think that's the point, isn't it? Is it's almost like you say online learning and you're immediately in that box and in that mindset. And actually, and I mentioned it earlier, we've got to work collaboratively with these people. We know where the knowledge sticks, from relationships, from what did Erica say, making it memorable, you know, all of those sorts of things. We know that, but we're probably not partnering with the right people to make it more memorable. And the online learning becomes much more stale and tick boxy and all of that sort of stuff. Any further questions for Debbie before I close? Do continue the conversation in the LinkedIn group. It's always nice to hear what you reflect on or what you feel. And any other ideas or feedback, we'd always appreciate them. If there's nothing else, just to thank Debbie for preparing this for us. We do appreciate it. And we hope to see you all again at another event again soon, maybe even in person one day. We can dream.
Absolutely. No, look, thank you everybody for listening in.
Thank you for your support, and see you again soon. I'm going to close it now. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, Sabine. Thanks, Elodie. Thanks, Barbie. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Simon. Yulan. Bye for now.